welcome to Offsite Dirt. My name is Mark Wille, and we're covering high performance build. We're visiting an island today. We're visiting an island called Grand Manan, and we're joined by Aron Jones. Aron, what's going on, bud?
It has been a crazy. I think we're on our third spring. I think we saw the sun for about 35 minutes since the middle of June. Um, Below us, you got all the hot weather, and that jet stream's dipping down, and it's coming up the eastern seaboard, and we've just got nothing but rain and fog.
So at Atlantic Canada, right? Summer of 2023. Building seasons kind of controlled by our friend and sometimes frenemy, Mother Nature, right?
She can be a harsh mistress. It just depends.
So there's tons of cool things with the new project of Big Dog Construction, and one of them that I like is you guys have long been using the practice of insulated concrete forms for your foundation, and in this case, it is doubling as a crawl space, and then there's a deck on it with this great product that we'll get into. But let's start with site evaluation, right? Like, what do we see on the site?
So, because the way the island is composed, it literally was formed by a volcanic rift. Like, sorry, I forget the exact year, but pre-Triassic. Um, so we never really know. We never really know what we have for site conditions under our visible layer, unless we see, Mother Nature's bones sticking out of the ground. Um, so we kind of have to dig down to find out what we have, because quite often below that flat surface we can have peaks and valleys of rock. So you could have, a million years of soil deposits, decomposing organics. um, you've either got to get rid of them so that you have like continuous bearing, or you have to do kind of an engineered pad to build on. Every situation is different. Every lot is different. And sometimes even within site, one building to another, your soil conditions can be extremely different. But you can count on rock, you can count on mud, sometimes clay.
What about soil gases? Can you count on those?
Um, so nobody has got confirmed testing of radon. What I can tell you is radon is present. Is it an issue? That's a case by case basis. In the past, we've done radon kits. Nobody has turned them in a timely fashion. In our personal house, we have an air thing, IQ air thing, and we have radon present, but it's not at a dangerous level. But there is a lot of shale. There's a lot of volcanic shale on the island. Shale is known to harbor radon gas. So, I might be okay over here, but over there might be higher concentrations. So let's just plan for it,
Yeah.
which we do. When we do our foundation, we plan to have perforated pipe. Maybe not run the entire perimeter, depending on the build, but definitely run through to the middle of the slab, tee off. We're able to depressurize the slab if we need to. We've made it a practice the last few years to just passively vent. We're going to run that stack right up through the roof. It'll passively vent. If there becomes an issue, very, very easy to add mechanical ventilation.
Yeah.
If you're not doing a full perimeter, one little trick that I'm going to throw out there is that perforated pipe, make sure it's on a grade. There's nothing worse, especially if you have groundwater and you have to add a fan, than that gurgling sound every time groundwater comes up.
So here's a fun one. When you're putting in a pipe, holes up or holes down?
For radon, I do holes down, just because typically a portion of that is going to be close enough to the slab or the insulation under the slab that holes up is just going to be blocked off.
Yep.
So holes down.
Yeah. I was always taught the practice of holes down, and you could sleeve it and you could put it on a bed of pea gravel or such. But I can tell you, I've seen many projects with holes up, and I ask what the strategy is, and the answer is often given, well, I was told to put the pipe there. Not the why, not the how. And so I'm not saying Aron is always right. I'm saying traditionally Aron is always right. And if we're going to cover subjects, right, both of us have the foundation of being agreeable, but we're also agreeable if we understand the intention and the context. We're not agreeable just to have a smile on our face.
No, an explanation goes a long ways. And if you don't ask questions, you're not going to learn anything. So if you see something new, ask the why, ask the how.
Yeah.
You might learn something, you might enlighten someone. Depends on the conversation.
So let's build this up. Your first task after the layout, right, and confirmation with your snap lines and your lasers is, I'm assuming you guys go footing style.
We go footing style, but actually started before that on this project. Our excavation contractor, uh, as soon as he started to get the hole sort of shaped up, he noticed where water was draining. Because this lot is sloped and the amount of rock, there's quite a bit of runoff. And even though at that point in time we hadn't had rain for an extended period of time, there was a layer of soil that was constantly wet. So, okay, that's where the water table effectively is on this project. So,
Yep.
brought in some crushed rock, gave us a nice, clean, level surface to put our footings on. Also made for a great capillary break, and it was going to give us a great place to start once we get the footing done. I'll
I
explain that
went
after.
to I went to high school with Mary and John Capillary, so I'm very familiar with that. For folks don't know, that's my attempt at humor, right? Construction humor is not often funny.
I knew their
Um,
Uncle John.
and John's little brother, Little John. Uh, okay, so that's also great for establishing the site, and I think that's very common. And gosh, the capillary break's good. About how much crushed stone do you put there, and what's the
Uh,
size of your aggregate?
so 3/4 or better for most of this. Fairly clean rock, produced locally. So it's not always clean as in the sense that other people think is clean. Just it's what we have available locally. You know, 2,500 people full time. You only have so many resources, and trucking everything from the mainland is just it's not practical. It's not feasible, and environmentally speaking, it's not the greatest practice.
Maybe our friends at Amazon can have a link to Box of Rocks, and we can order box of rocks.
Well, it would be cool if I could use my Prime membership to get the Glavel.
You know what? In our lifetime, Glavel might be an Amazon delivery. Then we could get our aggregate size, right? Our
Yeah,
box of rocks and our insulation all in one. Brilliant, right?
yeah.
It sounds like Bezos, if you happen to be joining us or one of your team, please add box of Glavel to your list. Be great.
Anyways, we've got our nice clean site conditions, rock base. We start with fast foot. It's a Great product if you've ever used it before. Funny enough, this was a product that I used over 20 years ago. Uh, it came out, everybody was going to use it, and then blink, I couldn't get it anymore locally. And then for about, we'll say probably about 10 or 15 years, it was pretty much a special order item. Like you really had to plan ahead to get it.
You think
Uh,
that's because of their popularity, or did they just become more region focused? Because, it's you were on the early side of adopters, right?
yeah,
And then market change, right?
I think it was locally, some of the big players didn't buy in, I think, locally. And so if it's not moving, people don't stock it. But, the last 4 or 5 years, it's been very easy to get.
It's a great product, time saver. It just does so many wonders. So the powers that be bringing it back to the island and bringing it, the work you do to bring it to other markets is great because
Yeah.
we see it a lot with our network, but we don't know who hasn't found out about it. And they're a good team. I've heard nothing but complimentary statements.
Well, one of the great things about it is if you're a small boutique builder, you don't have to store all these 2x10s or 2x8s as your forms. It's one less thing to store, one less thing to handle. Quite often, the 2x4 or the 2x6 that you do use on site, you can burn it up in other places in the build, bracing, blocking, whatever the case may be. Um, a lot of times we'll use it to brace a portion of our walls afterwards instead of using stud lumber. Just use that 2x4 that's already on site.
Nice. Nice. Okay, so this is established. The concrete is placed, right?
Concrete
Inside
is
of the
placed.
face, the fast foot. Uh, when it's cured out, what are we looking at?
We like to place reinforcing steel. We do our rebar, do that in-house. So we've got a few runs. We've got our canes sticking up in preparation for the ICF. I've done it both ways. I've done it where I've drilled them afterwards and epoxied them. And if you can do it ahead of time, unless you've got something really complicated, it's so worth it.
Yeah.
So here we've got, nice concrete forms, nice wide forms, cane standing up. We're ready to confirm our square again, snap some lines, get some cleats on, and start dropping block.
So it's fun, right? If anyone's ever got an ICF order in, again, insulated concrete form, depending on the size of your project, that's some real estate that it takes up.
You can.
You might have a truckload. I mean, let's face it, sometimes it's a few truckloads. So there's that whole staging aspect of that. You're no stranger to ICF. So you also know the reinforcing and alignment of it. Typically, it looks pretty as you go, but there's surprises, there's blowouts, and then there's being prepared for surprises and blowouts, right? Even the most perfect system requires hands on deck as needed because placing is placing.
Absolutely. And you know what? Concrete is concrete. And I don't care who you are. If you've placed enough concrete, you've experienced a blowout. And it doesn't matter what system you use, plywood, advanced form, Duraform, whatever the case may be, you've experienced a blowout somewhere along the way. Um, one of the worst blowouts I ever experienced was with a Westcon form. And everything was done correctly. It just the panel, which was a new panel, by the way, just decided it wasn't going to stay together. But ICF solves a lot of problems for us. It meets our code requirements, so we don't have to worry about adding insulation below grade. It's already done. But also on the labor side, you lug the form into the hole and the form stays in the hole. So you only handle it the one time. And it's, you know, it's foam. So although some
The
of them are awkward, relatively light,
the
relatively easy
fi-
on the
the the five pass fails principles too. You're getting a thermal break, you're getting an air control layer, and you're getting superior continuous insulation. You're actually getting superior continuous insulation twice, right? And you're isolating your air control layer, which is so unique about ICF, and you get a thermal break also twice. So that concrete, I like it because the concrete is, wet a little bit longer as well. I think I don't know the testing if it makes the concrete stronger, but in my mind, it does.
You're definitely going to get a slow cure. Um, Another great little snippet is typically you use less concrete. So a traditional 8-inch foundation wall, usually with an ICF, you can go to what they call a 6-inch wall, which will, depending on the system, will have 2 to 2 5/8 inches of insulation on the outside and inside with a 6-inch cavity that you fill with rebar and concrete. Um, and it may not be a lot, but a little bit over, several builds, that's a substantial amount of concrete.
So here's another inquisition. So since this is for a crawl, right? Are there are there any window bucks or access points to worry about, or were you just full speed ahead?
This was full speed ahead, except for some services.
Okay.
I had to put a sleeve in for the well line to bring the well in underground, and I had to put a sleeve in for the septic to exit. That's
So
that's it.
you're putting that in first, you're not coring that after.
No, if I
Okay.
can if I can do it so that it is part of the pour, um, not that I don't have to seal it and worry about details and stuff like that, but there's less typically there's less issues with that because it's already part of the pour. Um, you know, if somehow it got past your waterproof membrane, which we'll get into in a little bit, then it's got to get past the styrofoam, through the
Yep.
concrete, through the next layer of styrofoam, and into your build. Um, Not
I,
impossible,
I'm not a
but
fan
unlikely.
of the Yeah, Aaron, I'm not a fan of the labor afterwards of coring. And also you have to lay it out anyway where the rebar goes around. So I mean, we're not going to be putting a 6-inch hole through our rebar. So since you have to do it anyway, just give yourself, I mean, you're a carpenter, so you're already planning, but not everyone has that mindset, and fixing it later. It's kind of like making dinner after you ate it. It's a little bit harder.
Ask me how I know to do those ahead of time.
I think you just asked yourself. So what do you got for us? Story time.
Well, if you have to go behind yourself and fix a few of your own mistakes, eventually you learn to plan out most of your service penetrations ahead of time. And if you've ever had to core drill a slab or a wall with reinforced steel in it, yeah, it's no fun. I won't do it on this show, but I did a project where we had to drill a suspended slab, core drill a suspended slab, and it was in the home of a contractor that built bridges for a period of time. So you can imagine the size of the reinforcing steel that was in that suspended slab.
I don't want to imagine this. It's so not to be funny, but does our friend Mrs. Magnet help at that at all, or it can't really?
Depends on the situation.
Yeah.
If there's enough, you really you're not going to get an accurate reading, and it depends on how far down it is and what type of magnet you have.
Yeah.
There is some tools available now that supposedly can see the rebar. I've never seen one in person, but
Be
supposedly they
interesting
can tell.
to put an electrical charge to it and find it with our thermal imaging. But at that point, it's like, again, just avoid it. Like, stop trying to come up with these nifty ways of fixing it. So I'm gonna make a suggestion that we wrap what we can on ICF, and then we come back for a part two. What do you think?
That's fair. That's very fair. Where do you want to go from where we're at right now? Do you want to go right into the pour, or it's not a lot
Yeah,
to?
let's you just said pour. Now we're gonna have an argument on pour in place. This is great. You dive in.
First, I want to say that I understand that we actually place concrete, but more often than not, locally, you pour it. Even though you're placing it, you're still pouring it. In this case, when it comes out of the pump truck, it's more like dropping it anyways.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing. I think when we had these discussions, maybe in our use, there was a lot less pump trucks, right? And so I mean I live next door to a ready mix. So like, to me, like, I couldn't understand the guys anyway, but what they all poured, like, they, in their definition, they all poured, but the guys that worked the concrete, they all placed. So it was like division.
Yeah. Again, technically, you place it. I will never argue that point, but often when you say, "Yeah, we're going to pour tomorrow afternoon," that's what is understood. But anyways, different ways to brace ICF. Typically on tall walls or at least 9 foot and up, I'll use an alignment system. On this particular build, it was only a 54-inch wall. So the alignment system that I have available to me are not practical for that. So I just went with literally 2x4 wood bracing. It was more efficient for me to do it that way. There are people that don't necessarily agree with that, but it worked out well. Come check my walls out. They might not be perfect, but they're pretty darn close. One of the keys with ICF is on your long runs of walls is to lean them in a little bit, kind of curve them in a little bit before you place the concrete. And then once the concrete is placed, shove that wall back out to straight. It's just so much easier to control, and it's easier to push a wall than it is to try and pull it back in every day of the week. So we've got our concrete placed, everything is vibrated. We didn't have any window bucks or openings to deal with. So this was a relatively smooth pour. For this particular build, we didn't bother with placing anchor bolts because we're going to handle that afterwards. We'll probably leave that for part two. Do we want to get into some of the waterproofing details before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I think we do the waterproofing because at this spot you still have your supports, and let's just make the leap that everything is curing out, right? Or cured. Let's just say it's
Yeah,
cured.
it's
Now we have backfill stage, but we don't do that yet,
no,
right?
we don't do that yet. So this particular build was Nudura, and we're using the Nudura waterproof membrane from Tremco. So I like to run it vertically. There are people that will argue that point, but it's very slick, easy to keep straight, easy to detail, maintain your overlaps. I tie that in at my grade line and I run it down out across the top of the footing, down the side of the footing, and I tie that to the fast foot. So everything down, right, including underneath the footing, is now tied together on the exterior. We're still not done yet. We've done the entire foundation around the outside. Now we bring in some Delta MS, which is a drainage board. So it does two things. Anything that gets past it, it has that dimple board that's going to allow water to drain down and out over top of the footing, right to the drain tile. It also provides protection during backfill. So if there's something, a little large or maybe not quite as clean as it should be, it's going to protect that waterproof membrane. And the other big thing is you're not going to get any hydrostatic pressure against the wall. Anything that does get in there, it's got an escape route. You're not going to have a column of water build up and try and push through.
Yep.
Then we want to seal that membrane, the waterproof membrane, we want to seal that to the block with like a smear seal. And then what they call the Delta flash goes on. And that just kind of caps off that drainage board, make sure that rock and sand and stuff doesn't go down and behind.
Yep. They're a long established company. I know there's other brands that produce the dimple board, but the thing about Delta is it's a complete system, and you've had that experience of working with Dodura and Delta together. So to you, it's comprehensive and it's a meeting of the two brands.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're ready on the exterior for backfill, but we've still got some work to do inside as well. So in this particular case, we brought the grade up to 2 inches below the top of the footing. We install styrofoam. That brings us level with the top of the footing. Styrofoam wasn't my first choice. Unfortunately, what you build has to be durable and repeatable and efficient where you live. For this particular location, another product just wasn't readily available without an exorbitant amount of travel or money.
Yep.
So 2 inches of styrofoam, that brings us level with the top of the footing. Then we add another 2 inches of styrofoam, and that runs across the footing, connects to the ICF. So now we've got that continuous insulation. We're tied together outside through the inside. That gets sealed up there. And then the last little piece of the puzzle before we're ready inside is our Stego wrap. So we went with a 10 mil soil gas poly from Stego. So that's our vapor barrier, that's our air barrier, and our radon protection.
Yeah. It is such a durable product. So a lot of times when you're in certain steps, there's traditional polys that have been used over the years. You'll find them to be clear in nature. When Stego came aboard, they introduced that color, and they introduced a thicker deposit. And I'll tell you, when you're walking and moving and the traffic that goes in and out to prep the site, not only does the Stego hold up during construction, but you have a hard time destroying it, right? When you cut it, it cuts like a dream, no problem. You have a set of knife on you, you can nail that. But it is very durable. Do you also use the Stego tape?
So nothing against Stego tape, because it is a great product. Stego to Stego, beautiful. I've had some issues with the Stego tape to ICF. And so the problem isn't actually the Stego tape to the foam. The problem is the dirt that happens during construction.
Sure.
So it's the fine sand and silt, rock dust that's coming off. So what we have done is over the past few years, we've switched to Reson from Siga, and
Yep.
we use the dock skin primer. And if you ever have a chance to just get your hands on a little bit of dock skin primer, just put a little bit on your fingertip, just the primer, and just wait a few minutes and then stick your fingers together. The primer
Uh,
alone is incredibly sticky stuff, but we just want that. I want to know that whatever happens during placing concrete, draping around the course of construction, that
yep.
when that tape is adhered to the side of the concrete, that's it. It's stuck. It's going to
Yep.
be there for the next 300 years.
Yep.
Um,
It's a real
maybe it'll
world
only be
scenario.
250, but
Yeah.
that's what we're shooting for. I
It's
do not work on a 50-year design site. I want this building to be here for eons.
the building will be here longer than our recording talking about the building. That's for sure.
That's my goal. That is my goal.
So also, I don't know if we covered it, but when you're pouring, the top of the ICF will later be receiving something else. How do you keep that in a good place for this phase without it getting, let's say, a little junked up, right? Or a lot bit junked up, depending on how you have to hustle.
Um, so having a plan in place and having players in place that are willing to play ball. Our excavation contractor knows that he can't beat up the top of the wall. Um, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times we're involved in some of the final stages of the groundwork inside the foundation. And that changes things, like if I'm there on site, there's a little bit, I shouldn't say there's more respect for the wall because everybody we use respects that. They understand what it is and they understand why it's there. Um, you know, Concrete subcontractor right through. Everybody knows that you can't make a big mess, and if you do, you got to clean it up.
Yeah,
So for the most part, we have very little to do once the top of that wall is cured.
got it.
It's it is ready to receive a sill plate.
Well, on risk of going too far, I think we're at silk plate details for part two and beyond, right? Um, any final tips and tricks, Mr. Aron Jones, Big Dog
Uh,
Construction?
I won't say that. I would just say that if you're looking at building efficiently and you're in a climate that requires you to insulate below grade, have a serious look at ICF.
Yeah,
It's not the only answer, but there's a lot of pros to using it. And it's great for year-round construction. Um, if you've ever done concrete in the winter, ICF is definitely the way to go for winter construction.
experience is the best teacher. So we've been joined with Aron Jones, Big Dog Construction. Simply type that into your Google machine and you could find Aron on the LinkedIn. You could find Big Dog Construction certainly on Instagram. How does that handle actually read on IG?
BigDogConstruction.gm.
I knew that. It's better hearing it from you in case I say it wrong. We'll be back in part two a week from now. So if you're watching these together and you watch part two first, well, that's out of sequence. But as you learn, sometimes construction falls out of sequence. For Offsite Dirt and a high performance build, Aron Jones, Big Dog Construction. I'm Mark Wille. All this and more. See you real soon.